From Ian Little. It seems that the 2016 election was a paradigm shift in American politics, especially on the right. The right, as we've known them since the Reagan era, is no longer the right of today. I wonder what you think about this new right, and do you think they will be more or less effective than the right of the 80s through the early 10s? Yes and no. This is a super question. First of all, when we talk about modern right, I'm going to specifically exclude what's called the alt-right. I think personally that a fair amount of the alt-right is just trolling, plain and simple. With that said, there are some really disgusting people on the alt-right. Anybody who used this word cuck is, I don't need to be on the same team as those people. But if you want to talk about the conservative movement as it exists now versus how it existed in 1980 or the 80s, we have had to sacrifice a number. You know what? I don't even think that's true. I was going to say we've had to sacrifice a number of our principles, but I'm not entirely sure that's true. The way I see it is this: the 2016 election and everything that's happening since the 2016 election is a result of the right slowly beginning to understand the depths of their cultural defeat. That's why the election of Donald Trump was, it's either a last gasp or it's midway. It's one or the other. Donald Trump is so despised by the left because he's the only person that the Republicans have ever run that I can see. Well, Reagan's an exception. Reagan and Trump are both. Well, that's an interesting comparison between the two. Reagan was just an actor. Started out as an actor. He was a Democrat, and he was a patriot. He said, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me." Reagan invented President Reagan on this General Electric tour. He was speaking around the country. GE was paying him. He was going to little towns. He's sitting in his bus at night, and he's writing out. He's becoming a conservative. He's figuring it out. I had the exact same experience as him. Just basically through talking to people, things got clearer, and talking to people, some things made sense and others not, and so on and so forth. So Reagan was a intellectual. He wasn't an intellectual giant, but the beauty of this is it doesn't have to be. It's pretty simple, really. Get the government off our backs. Trump is much more. I'll go with what I was originally doing. He's much more tainted than this. He's got a lot more big government tendencies. I don't think Donald Trump understands really the essence of the thing. He's got a lot of tendencies I see sometimes to like the big government solutions, but that's not the point. You go to war with the army you have, and Trump was the only person that could have won that election. And Trump is the only person that could have smashed this media information complex. Fight's not over yet by any means. As we record this Wednesday night, Steve Bannon called Trump's association with the Russians treasonable. I've been saying from the beginning that Steve Bannon is one of the worst people that ever lived. Steve Bannon is a lunatic, and he is an unpleasant man. I've met him many times, and I've had secondhand business dealings with him once, and he is and has been and will continue to be an awful person, a terrible person. But put that aside for a minute. Trump is the only person, so we're talking about modern conservatives. Trump is the only person since Reagan to be able to beat the left at what the left is good at, and it's for the same reason. Donald Trump was on television, and Ronald Reagan was in the movies. Both of them are media communicators. People say Ronald Reagan was just an old idiot playing the president. No. Ronald Reagan was just an older man playing the president. There's nothing idiotic about it. He was playing the role of President of the United States. He did it beautifully. Trump is not playing the role of the President of the United States beautifully at all. But Trump is a product of reality TV. Ronald Reagan had that kind of elegance that comes from scripted Hollywood movies and the beautiful soft lighting and the studio system and Claude Colbert and all of that Hollywood gloss Reagan grew up with. So that's the kind of communication he knew. But Trump is a product of reality TV, and there's no soft lighting on Donald Trump, and there's no delicate editing, and there's none of that. Donald Trump is a available light, camera, raw image guy, and he understands the modern audience, and he understands media. The thing that the left will never understand, and it took me a long time to believe it, but I've come to believe it, is that whether he's aware of it, let me rephrase that, he's certainly aware of it, whether or not he sits and plans it like a master three-dimensional chessman, or whether it's more of an instinctual thing, and I suspect it's the latter. Trump understands, and certainly played the entire election like a violin, by understanding that there were things that he could say that his supporters believed, but say it in such a way that would drive the left barking mad. And by having the left go barking mad, they would just cover it, and they would keep covering it. He worked the publicity machine like no one I have ever seen. That's actual genius. It's genius, the way he handled the press. And now we're in the middle of the fight, right? I mean, the election was the big wake-up call, and the media is now in this, the news media and the pop culture is now in this, they're pot committed. Everybody's all in, both sides all in. And Trump still manages to sucker them out. And the verdict is still out on this one. But Trump, when I say Trump understands the media and understands how the left works, it's because by any standard of what we would have used earlier, Donald Trump fights dirty. But when you have, Marquis of Queensberry's rules and you're Gentleman Jim, and you're standing there against a guy who brings a knife to a boxing match and uses it to shiv you in the ribs while you're turning around to shake hands with him or something, then all of a sudden you realize, well, Trump may be a dirty fighter, but it's a dirty fight. So he plays by their rules, and they hate him because he does it that way. And they take him seriously, and I don't know how seriously to take Donald Trump, but I do know I don't take him as seriously as the left does. What's that classic line? Somebody said, difference between the left and the right is that the left takes Trump seriously but not figuratively, and the right takes him figuratively but not seriously. Or did I get that backwards? In any event, you get it. So Trump is the only politician out there that is willing to go to war with the media. And I suspect the only reason that Donald Trump is willing to do that, well, two reasons. Number one, he's got a very thick skin. He's been in the public, and he's been ridiculed in the spotlight for 40 years now. I remember being in college and reading Spy magazine, which I thought was brilliant. I'm sure if I read it now, I'd throw up. It was so left-wing, but I thought it was brilliant. And this would be 1980s. They just hated him, called him a short-fingered vulgarian, and all these, it was hilarious. Trump said, laugh it up. I'll be here when your magazine closes. And Spy said, oh, no, you won't. And sure enough, 2 years later, Spy closes, and there's Donald Trump again. So he has a very thick skin and at the same time a thin skin. But he also he doesn't care. I think Trump is, I think a guy, put aside the politics of Trump, I think a guy who is, not seriously, and yes, literally and figuratively, sorry about that, there's something about a guy who puts his name on his buildings in gold and on his plane and so on. There's something about a guy like that is coming from a place of genuine insincerity. I mean, not insincerity so much as insecurity is the word I was looking for. He is driven by something that is I wouldn't describe as terribly noble, and that makes him exactly like the left in many ways. So what you have was an election in 2012 where you've got a very rich Republican running away from his money and saying, well, I don't really make all that much money, which everybody knows is a lie, and is just basically Mitt Romney running away from everything he's supposed to be defending, which is wealth creation and all the rest of it. Then all of a sudden in 2016, you got a Republican who's not only saying, he's not only not saying I'm not a rich guy. He's saying I'm much richer than you think, and the way to get Trump is not to accuse him of being rich. The way to get Trump is to accuse him of not having as much money as he claims to have. He can't stand that. It's a real weakness of his. But he is the only guy who I have ever seen out there who just doesn't care. And I think one of the things about, and I think there's some, I think you can pretty much sum up Trump's effectiveness with this one particular example. Once again, the left got vapors because Trump referred to the White House as kind of a dump. Kind of a dump? What? Why, Michelle and Barack Obama lived there for the last 8 years. And Trump says, yeah, it's kind of a dump. And it is a dump. And to Trump, it's certainly a dump. The office of the presidency, the Oval Office, all of this stuff is a big step down for him. He doesn't much care. I think that's really I think that's what it was. I think the reason that Donald Trump got elected was he was the first politician I've seen in forever who struck me as not really caring much whether he got it or not. Didn't really need the job, Wasn't like Bill Clinton, who at the age of 12 is looking starry-eyed up at John Kennedy, imagining all the babes he's going to be able to bag if he can only get himself into elected office. Trump just doesn't care. He can call the White House a dump because it is. And who else can do that? So, I was late to the Trump party, and I'm still not 100% on board there, and only because there are things he does that I just find very embarrassing. That's all there is to it. The things he says I find embarrassing. But he has saved this country, and at the very least given us a period of recovery, not just from the damage that Hillary Clinton would have done, which I think might have sealed the deal, but he derailed history. That's quite an achievement, to derail history. And he did it. And that history was not going well for us. And so the main reason the left is so violently against him is because he took away their future, at least for 4 years. He took away the glorious road to socialism. He got the American people to get up on their hind legs and disagree with our media overlords. And they're going to try and destroy him for it. And they may succeed. And they may not. I do think that if I was going to tell you how the battle was going at the beginning of the second year of a 4-year and perhaps an 8-year war, as we enter year 2 of this battle, I would say that Donald Trump has not scored as many victories as he could have scored, but the attacks on him, I think, were, the whole Russia thing, independent, the investigators, special counsel, and all the rest of it. I think that is the left's haymaker. I think that's the best punch they have, or are likely to have, and so he seems to have weathered their haymaker easily. Here's what's going to determine this fight. And this is why I'm actually hopeful. And this will be our final comments for the night. If Barack Obama had shown the economic growth that Donald Trump had shown in the first year, if he'd done that over 8 years, they'd call him a savior. Donald Trump did in 8 months what Barack Obama couldn't do in 8 years. The economy is booming. Jobs are up. Unemployment's down. Confidence is at a 20-year high. And he got the tax cut, which was an important political win, because if the president is perceived as losing all the time, then what kind of a deal maker is Trump anyway? But I've been saying for the last 8 years that the economy is this compressed spring just waiting to grow. And I think that just by getting the tax cut, Donald Trump has won the war, even if he wins it posthumously. If he has had this much economic growth under Obama policies, then you wait and see what happens when a tax cut comes into play next year. First of all, the American people are going to go home with more money than they had the previous week. That's going to be a shock for most Americans. And they're going to like that a lot. But if you think the economy is growing now, and it is, wait till you see what happens when corporations aren't paying 33%, they're paying 20% like every other corporation in every other country in the world. I suspect that this economy is going to grow so fast and so remarkably that right around the time that re-election is appearing, things are going to be humming. Now they're already saying, "Oh, this is to me is the most pathetic thing." But the people are saying, "Well, the economy is picking up now because only now Obama's policies are finally taking effect." Really? Well, then those are crummy policies if they take 8 years to come to effect, because Trump's policies took effect in 3-4 months. Ted says that the tax cuts weren't big enough for small business LLCs. Amen, brother, because this is a small business LLC, and we're not seeing much of a benefit from this at all. But I am convinced that it's good for the country, and so I think that the war of Donald Trump versus the media will be played out by people's paychecks in the next 2 or 3 years. And I think, given how shocking the Obama 8 years were in terms of suppressing economic activity, that just taking your foot off the brake, let alone getting it onto the accelerator, is going to be seeming like a change. If people in 2020, right? Yeah. In 2020, if people are making more money than they did before, and they feel like things are growing and people are being hired, then Trump's going to win big. And I think that's a pretty good chance it's going to happen. We'll see. 35% growth in the stock market. I'm always suspicious about the stock market. But in any event, it's, big numbers. And as I said, Brahma they would have made a gold statue of him if he'd gotten anything like this, half of these numbers. That'll do it for 2 hours of episode number 174 of the Stratosphere Lounge. Pleasure being with you tonight. It's a fun night, fun topics. And we will be back hopefully next Wednesday, but if not, the Wednesday after that. And I don't see any reason why we won't be here next Wednesday. So thanks again for all the support, and I guess now it's time to say goodbye to all our company. And I'll think of something clever that rhymes with that for next week.